Top of the day, beautiful people. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here with me. Let's start our conversation here. You don't heal by silencing your inner child. I said this on Monday. You heal by giving them a seat at the table. You don't heal by silencing the voice in your mind that has been the voice of dissent or that voice of your inner critic. Whatever you've associated that voice with, you're not going to heal or you're not going to improve the quality of your mental health by trying to silence that voice, but in fact, giving that voice a seat at the table, recognizing that that voice is a reflection of a belief system that is held within a version of you that we're often referring to as your inner child. Think of it like this. Most of us have felt that we have been at war with ourselves. Like part of you know what to do, and you know that you should set the boundaries in your life. You know that you should speak up for yourself, that you know that you should speak your truth, or you know what to do to take the next steps, but another part of you just feels paralyzed, afraid, or feels small, or feels like you are not capable of achieving the task in front of you. That's not just indecision, as many of us like to call it. But that's our inner child. That's the conflict between the adult you. Nurse Cynthia, happy healing to you and welcome to the conversation. That's the conflict between the adult you and that inner child that carries the wound. So again, the adult you carries the pain and the inner child carries the wound. So that conflict that you're often facing is just that. Because until you learn to integrate those two parts of you, the logical adult that is trying to advance your life, that is trying to achieve all of your goals and all of your aspirations, and the emotional inner child that is trying to protect you from the pain of that original wound will always be in conflict. And that is why many of us feel stuck. Welcome back to the Courage to Heal podcast. This is week 10 of the Trauma to Triumph Healing Challenge. And today we're going to be tackling a huge part of healing that many people don't really talk about. And that's how to stop battling your inner child and start leading your inner child. Last episode on Monday, we uncovered why your inner child is still controlling your life. And today we're going to be breaking down how to integrate your inner child and your adult self so that you can stop feeling that you're at war with yourself. And what are some of the common struggles that we face when we're trying to balance that emotional inner child that is always concerned with protection and the logical adult that is concerned with achieving our goals and the things that we've set forth for ourselves in our life. And then lastly, we're going to discuss how to build a life where your inner child feels heard and seen, but not in charge. Again, the goal of this step of integrating your inner child is not to silence your inner child, but to give your inner child a seat at the table so that that part of yourself doesn't have to act out or scream to be heard or seen. And if you're just joining this conversation again, this is week 10 of the Trauma to Triumph Healing Challenge. And if you're listening and you're going, week 10, man, I have missed a lot. That is true. But the next challenge starts in April, and our boot camp for the April challenge starts in the third week of March. That means in just 2 weeks, we're going to be rolling into the next challenge. So if you're hearing this information and you're wondering, how can I be a part of this healing challenge? You can go to our website, Happy Healing. That's healing without a G, HEALIN, happyhealing.com, and go to the Trauma to Triumph Healing Challenge. And if you use the promo code FIRMDECISION 2025, you will be able to save additionally off of your enrollment fee. With that said, we'll give you more information on that later. Let's jump into this conversation. So what does integration with your inner child actually looks like? Right? What does that actually look like to integrate with your inner child? I can't stress to you enough that many people believe that this process of healing is getting rid of the voice of dissent or the voice of criticism or the voice that you've been battling your entire life. Many people believe that the goal is to eliminate that voice. But if you recognize that voice as the limiting beliefs that are being held in your inner child, or the limiting beliefs that you hold from different experiences in your life, then you're trying to get rid of parts of you. And that would take us back to session number, I believe, 8, when we were talking about accepting and embracing all the parts of you. Nyla, happy healing to you. We're counting down, Nyla. We're about 2 weeks away from boot camp for the April challenge. I can't wait for yourself and everyone else that is enrolled in April to experience this entire challenge from step 1, because it is truly life-changing and transformative. So again, you don't get rid of your inner child. You learn how to lead your inner child. And I want us to really think about that. Many of us don't recognize the reason why our triggers are so strong, or it seems like those parts of us react so strongly whenever we are triggered, is because we haven't been the best leaders as the adults in our lives. What does that mean? So, if you think the process is for you to fix your inner child, right? If you think the process is about you becoming so strong that you never feel hurt again, if you think the process is about keeping your inner child in his or her place, then that's always going to be a struggle for you, because you're not being the best leader for that part of you. And I'm going to show you some of the other things that we do as poor leaders in our lives as far as leading our inner child. But here's what we really should be focused on about creating a balance where the adult me today, I am in charge of the decision making, because I have more information than I had when I had the experiences that left me wounded. However, my inner child feels safe, heard, and seen. Again, that's why it's important, if you're just joining this conversation and you're like, these concepts make sense to me, but I'm missing some information. That's because we're on step number 10. But again, the next challenge starts in April, so you can still catch up. But if you stay with us, you'll see where some of this information will get you, right? So what does integration actually mean? What does it look like? When your inner child expresses fear, so the foundation of this is your emotions and that voice of dissent, or that voice of your inner child that you have been battling in your mind, that voice is giving you information and not instructions. That voice is telling you where in yourself you need to show more attention, more love, and more nurturing. That voice is not trying to hinder you from being successful. For some of you, that breakthrough right there is enough for you to stop the battle that has been plaguing your life, because you've always considered that voice of negativity in your mind as it trying to hinder you from being successful. For many of you, your religious foundation has convinced you that that voice is some outside entity that is trying to hinder any progress in your life. But I would offer to you that that voice is simply the limiting beliefs that you hold from different traumatic experiences throughout your life. And if you stop trying to suppress that voice and see that voice as information, meaning the voice is directing you to the parts of you that you need to build up, to the parts of you that the limiting belief is living in, so that you can nurture those parts of yourself, so that you can pour into those parts of yourself. So listen, when you think of that voice from that perspective as information that is guiding you to the parts of you where you need to pour into, then the next question should be, well, how do I do the pouring into myself, coach? And I would say, great question. So when you express, or when you feel fear, and you recognize that this voice or this emotional sense of fear is information and not direction, You can feel the fear, but yet still decide what happens next and not be driven by the fear. Because the thing is, the fear could be a byproduct of a past experience that is being triggered in this moment. So even though you feel fearful in this moment may not require you to give a response to protect yourself. Oftentimes, this is where many of us get ourselves in verbal trouble, where when we're not aware of our triggers or the thing that make us feel afraid, someone will do something right now, and the fear that comes up is not associated with the incident or the current environment that I'm in, but that fear is associated with my past experiences. And because I'm not aware of my past traumas, I will react and say something in this moment based on that moment, and now I have to suffer the consequences because that comment was out of place. Does that make sense to you all? Purple hearts in the chat if it does. So here's another example. If your inner child reacts emotionally, you can still react with logic because the emotion is there to give you information and not directions. So when your inner child wants comfort, you can actually provide and give it in a healthy way. That's the integration where your inner child has a seat at the table, but your inner child is not driving. Because think about it. When you're being triggered, your inner child is driving. That's what the trigger is. Something based on an experience from your past has been touched on. It's like a wound or a scab that hasn't healed all the way. So when somebody brushes up against it, what do? You jump and you get what? Defensive. To do what? Protect yourself. This is the same thing when we haven't healed our inner child wounds yet, right? Our triggers are like the scabs that haven't healed completely. So when somebody says something or does something that touches that wound again, what do? You react and you get defensive. To what? Protect yourself. Here's a wisdom nugget for you. And you'll hear me continue to repeat this because I believe for many of us, we have had such a adversarial relationship with that voice in our minds that it has not clicked to you yet, that the voice in your mind, even though it has been negative, that negative voice has been trying to protect you. The voice that tells you we're not good enough to do that, let's not even try. You're like, well, coach, how can a negative voice like that be trying to protect me? Your inner child is simply trying to tell you, I don't want to fail again and feel like I'm not good enough. So the way that I'm going to convince us to avoid the failure and that feeling of we're not good enough that we've experienced from our past, I'm just going to tell us that there's no need for us to try it. I'm going to give you some more examples of that here in just a little bit when we get into the common struggles of integrating your inner child. But here's your wisdom nugget. Healing doesn't silence your inner child. This process of healing is teaching your inner child that he or she does not need to scream or act out to be seen or heard. In essence, I recognize that whenever this reaction happens, instead of trying to suppress it, I recognize and identify what it is, but I, the adult, is still driving this vehicle. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you felt like you were battling yourself, and what was the issue? When was the last time you felt like you were battling yourself, and what was the battle over? I'm going to show you all how this segues into the common struggles that Change Your Mindset says, yesterday, feeling like I'm not where I should be in my career. Okay, so what was the battle though? If you were simply feeling like I'm not where I'm supposed to be, that's an observation. What was the battle though? And Joe, we're gonna jump on yours in just a minute. I want to finish up with change your mindset real quick because I think this is gonna be very revealing for us all. And change your mindset, the reason, come on, not good enough. So here was the battle. The observation or the narrative was, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Out of that narrative, the underlining sense of the battle or the underlining voice of dissent or the underlining inner critic is something inside me is not good enough, and that's why I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Now, from what I just explained to you all, normally some of us would try to battle that voice, right? And this is what change your mindset is explaining to us. I went to war with that voice of I'm not good enough or why am I not where I'm supposed to be. Instead of battling that voice, embrace it. Give that voice a seat at the table of your decision making. And this is how you do it. And I'm going to go into more details here in segment 3, but I'll give you all a quick insight. The way that you do that is, well, why do I feel as though I'm not where I'm supposed to be? That's because I have other aspirations and desires and dreams. I envision myself being in a different place than where I am now. And out of this observation, I feel like there's a part of me that is not doing what I'm supposed to do, or there's a part of me that's not good enough. I recognize that feeling. Where's that feeling coming from? Why do I feel like I'm not good enough? What I'm doing in that moment, instead of battling that thought, suppressing that thought, rebuking that thought, telling that thought that it can go back to the pits of hell from which it came, telling that thought that whoever sent it, I rebuke it and I send it back to them with 100-fold or whatever all of that stuff, instead of all of that, if I recognize that that thought is a limiting belief that is coming out of past experiences based on things that I've been through, and rather than me trying to rebuke, rebut, shut up, and silence that thought, if I recognize that thought as directing me to a part of myself that needs to be built up, nurtured, and poured into, then in that moment, I can say, I recognize that there's a part of me that may not think that I'm where I'm supposed to be or that I have the ability to get to where I want to be. I recognize that. In that recognition, I'm now giving or I'm recognizing that this is something that's coming from within me. This isn't something I need to fight. This is something I need to look at. This is something that I need to recognize. And now I can start pouring into that part of myself. And we'll get into that in segment 3. But let's answer some questions here. What are some of the common struggles with integrating your inner child? I want to open that part of the conversation with saying this. Just because you've met your inner child doesn't mean that they trust you. Hello. Just because you've had a moment to recognize that there are parts of you that may have different belief systems than the adult you, and you've able to recognize that these are different versions of you, that you've had different experiences, and that there are parts of you that have been frozen in stages of development. Just because you have this awareness does not mean that you have self-trust yet. And some of you think, well, coach, I'm a little lost. How do I not trust myself? Well, ask yourself, how do you keep questioning the decisions that you make every day, even after you've made those decisions? When you can answer that question, then you know why it's common that people don't trust themselves. All right, let's get into some of this. What are some of the real struggles that come up when we're trying to integrate with our inner child? Coach, my inner child doesn't trust me. The only reason I smile at that because it's so common. And I want you to think about it. If you spent years ignoring someone in your life, if you spent years telling someone in your life, stop crying because that's not going to be acceptable to the people out there. Be tough because that's what we need to be so that we can fit in out there. That's not a big deal because it's not going to be looked upon positively if you make a big deal about this right now. We don't have time for this because what you want to make a big deal about is not something that's important to the objective and the goal. If you treated someone in your life that way, would that person just automatically trust you because you started paying attention to them now? So don't be surprised that even though you're actively doing this work, there's still opportunity between this connection and this trust factor with the parts of you that you've suppressed and pushed to the side for so long. Healing starts with rebuilding that trust by acknowledging the pain and by showing those parts of you that you'll listen now. That you won't try to shut up that voice of negativity when it comes up, but you'll recognize that that voice is coming out of a part of you that is simply giving you information of where you need to pour into. Do we understand how much mental pressure that relieves off of so many of you when you stop fighting that voice in your mind and you see it as information and not something that is trying to stop you, hinder you, or cause you to fail? You're never going to be able to be good enough to do the thing that you want to do. Hey, I recognize that this fear is a part of me. But I also know that I've worked hard to get here. And I know that everything that I need to do, I've done. And that this situation is working out for my ultimate and long-term good. And that even though I recognize that this part of me, based on previous experiences that I may have, has a little bit of doubt in my own ability to accomplish the goals that are in front of me, but I know that we're capable, we're able, and we're more than enough. Because I want you to think about this. Many of you hear this self-talk and you wonder, Coach, I don't know if this is going to work. Think about it like this. If you were a child in that very moment, or if your child or if a child approached you with the same sentences that your inner child or that voice in your mind says to you, if a child approached you and said those things about his or herself, what would you say to that child in that moment? That's what you say to that child in that moment. Does that make sense to you all? Purple hearts in the chat if you can. Another one that I get is, why do I still feel overwhelmed by my emotions, Coach? I'm here, I'm doing the work. I've made the connections with my inner child, but there are still times where my emotions seem to overwhelm me. Thank you for the love. One of the things that I remind us all of this journey of healing is A, not to get rid of your inner child, and B, you're not going to get rid of the triggers. Because why? This goes back to some of the foundational things that we teach you. Your triggers are part of your defense system. You are supposed to be triggered by things. Listen to me carefully. Your triggers are part of your defense system. You are supposed to be triggered by things. Your triggers are just not supposed to run your life. You're supposed to be triggered. You're supposed to observe the information that this trigger is presenting to you and then make a decision that serves your long-term best interest. So the triggers don't go away. Your inner child doesn't fade away once you've gone through this process of healing. You actually just integrate with this part of yourself. So those reactions stop controlling you. So let me show you what this looks like for those of you that kind of need to see it. Your emotions are valid, but they aren't always the facts of the situation, because sometimes your emotions are referencing a past experience because the present experience resembles the past experience. And the way that your triggers are designed to protect you, when something in the present moment resembles a threat from the past, your triggers are supposed to alarm you to the threat so that you make a decision based on your observation of the present moment, not based on the warning from the past. This is, again, the distinction between your emotions and triggers are meant to give you information and not directions. If you see your emotions and your triggers as just directions as to what to do, then the past is dictating your response here. So the trigger is simply telling you what to do in this moment. And that's not how triggers work or how they were designed. They're designed to say, hey, this present moment looks like a threat from the past moment. I just gave you the information. And now you, having heard or seen or felt that trigger or that alarm, you assess the present moment for if that threat is present now. And then you make a decision that serves your long-term best interest. So what does this look like, Coach? All right. Your adult self needs to step in when you feel that trigger and say, I know that I'm scared, but I'm safe in this moment after I've made the observation. Does that make sense? Purple hearts in the chat if it does. Absolutely, Catherine. Your emotions are a part of your security system. Here's the thing, though. When you experience trauma in your early formative years and nobody gives you proper information or context around that trauma, your security system becomes corrupt because now it goes into overdrive mode. I cannot determine what the threat is and why the threat is present. Therefore, everything that looks and sounds and seems like that threat, I have to perceive as the threat. Sometimes you just have to simply say, I hear you. After assessing the situation that I'm in right now, I'm going to make the decision knowing that we're safe. And here's the powerful thing about those moments. Remember, we're talking about not silencing that voice, but giving that voice a seat at the table so that instead of reacting as an uncontrollable trigger, that voice receives, or you receive that voice as information. So now that voice or that part of you doesn't have to act out or scream out to be seen and heard, but that voice can literally start delivering information to you as your security system or your information system should. Here's another one that I get often. Coach, what if I feel guilty for setting boundaries with myself? Somebody was like, well, wait, Coach, that's not my experience. Let me help you out. Many people will feel guilty when they start correcting their inner child, and I'm going to tell you why. For some of you, it feels like you're rejecting yourself again. And for some of you, it feels like you're back in the same conflict. And that's because you're not doing it with compassion for yourself. See, the conversation that I have with my inner child that's bringing me information, for some of you, you're still irritated that you're getting this information because the information is making you anxious. The information that your inner child is pointing you to is making you anxious. Therefore, when you're experiencing the anxiety, you feel a sense of frustration at the source of the anxiety. So now you have to speak to that part of you, because here's something that is going to happen. For many of you that are on this path, you will continue to repeat this thing where it continues to open up. Every time that file opens up, sometimes it's going to be that alarm. Every time you encounter a specific type of person, it's going to feel like that alarm, that overwhelming sense of emotion, and you get frustrated with, why do I keep reacting and responding the same way? And sometimes you get frustrated with yourself. Why am I this way? Why do I keep thinking like this? Why does my mind work like this? Why can't I let it go? And you start beating yourself up. And I want you to slow down and recognize, in this moment, you're lacking compassion for yourself. Yes, every time that your inner child is triggered by a situation that looks like a similar pain from your past, you're going to feel that trigger. And it's okay. Show yourself some compassion and just pour love and assurance into that part of yourself. One of the things that many of you that have been a part of this conversation know is the example of the files. So I want you to think of these experiences as files that are loaded on your hard drive. And every time a situation happens in your life that looks like a similar situation from your past, a file opens. And out of that file comes usually the 5 elements of how trauma is formed. I won't get into that right now, but I'll speak to it from this perspective. Out of that file will come whatever previous experience and whatever previous information was triggered. You have to deposit new information into that file. So that file may open 1,000 times in a day because you're being triggered about that thing. And every time that file opens, for many of us, we felt frustrated with ourselves. We felt frustrated that, why do I keep feeling this? Why do I keep having this thought? Why? Instead of becoming frustrated, just see it as a file that opens and see it as an opportunity. Because every time that file opens, if you speak something nurturing, something positive, something uplifting to yourself, you're depositing stuff into that file. So over time, when that file is triggered and it opens, what will come out is what you've been depositing into that file. But it requires you to have grace for yourself and recognize that that file is not opening because your inner child is trying to irritate you or trying to distract you or trying to ruin the good time that you think you're having, but this thought keeps ruining it. The thought is trying to protect you. If you acknowledge the thought, make space for the part of you that is trying to give you this information, it will stop popping up as conflict. Because why? I no longer need to scream and act out from your subconscious mind because you hear me. You've given me a seat at the table, and I recognize that I can trust you to lead us. The reason why your inner child continues to act out as triggers is because you haven't shown to be a good steward of your emotions. And because you would rather shut down the emotion that is trying to protect you, the protection part is not going to stop, because that's what's keeping you alive, whether you know it or not. The same place that those thoughts that are irritating you are coming from is the same place that alerts you to run when there's danger, literally physical danger. It's the same operating system. When you recognize that this is just your operating system, your belief systems appearing to you when they feel relevant or needed. So even the negative thought is a belief system that feels needed in the moment that it comes to you. If you are willing to recognize that this is a part of you trying to protect you, then you can actually learn to change the patterns that produces the negative thought, because you're pouring positive, nurturing affirmations into that part of you that I don't need to be protected in this space anymore, Kohn. We're good. But I got to show Kohn this over and over and over again. Let me show you something. You doing this, depositing into the files, correcting your inner child, giving your inner child the proper information, nurturing and love with compassion. This is an act of self-love, because you're saying, I love myself enough to keep me safe. I love myself enough to hear when I'm trying to make sure that I am safe and I'm not so afraid that I have to shut up that voice and tell that voice to be quiet. I love myself enough to not let fear run my life. So when the fear comes up, instead of trying to shut it up, I acknowledge that I am afraid, that this fear is coming out of me. But I deposit into that file that released that fear that we're okay in this moment. And the file gently closes. And 10 minutes later, it may open up again, because this is my operating system. My defense system feels the threat. I don't know how to stay calm in these moments, because all I've ever done throughout my life is become anxious in moments like this. And somehow in my mind, the anxiety made me feel safe. Because think about it. When you became anxious, oftentimes you did nothing to change the situation, but the anxiety, the emotion of that becomes a sense of, okay, I'm doing the thing that makes me feel safe, when in fact, it's not making you feel safe. But if you acknowledge that emotion, I recognize that I'm anxious in this moment because this moment reminds me of possible times. This moment may remind me of something in my past that I failed at. This moment may remind me of something in my past where someone did something to me. This moment is producing fear in me because maybe I don't believe I can do this, because I'm afraid that if I fail at it, I'm going to experience the same pain that I felt when I was told that I'd never be nothing in life. I recognize that. But in this moment, all things are working out for our good. And this thing too shall work out for my good. And we have what it takes to accomplish this goal. You have to pour into the parts of you that's releasing the emotion that's giving you this information. Loving your inner child doesn't mean giving them control. It means giving them the comfort and assurance to know that they are heard and seen and have a seat at the table of your life. All right, coach. Let's get down to the meat and potatoes, as they say. How do I balance my inner child's emotions and need for protection with my adult objectives and my adult logic? How do I balance my inner child's emotions and need for protection with my adult desires and my adult logic? Let's start here. Healing happens when you become the adult that your inner child need. If we go back, healing happens when you become the adult that your inner child needed in the moment that you experienced your trauma. Think about that. Whether you were beaten to a place where you felt so low and so unloved, what type of adult did you need in that moment? Let's say you were physically abused in other ways. What type of adult did you need in that moment? Maybe you were neglected and you were never loved on and you were never poured into and you were never spoken to in a positive way. In the moment that you recognize that that was your reality, what adult did you need? What did you need them to say? Healing happens when you, the adult that's been carrying the pain, is willing to sacrifice your own release to heal the wound that your inner child has been carrying. Because when you understand the perfect circle of healing, if you heal that wound, it will relieve the pain. So how do we balance our inner child's emotions with our adult logic? I'll give you all some very simple steps. Step 1, you have to create a pause between feeling and reacting. That pause is your moment of allowing your emotions to become information and not directions. For many of you, you don't have that pause because your emotions are directions. You don't need a pause because you think when you feel angry, you need to act angry. Create a pause between feeling and reacting because your emotions, your thoughts are all designed to give you information. Tammy, happy healing to you. Welcome to the conversation. And that pause allows you to do this assessment. I wonder, is this emotion directly reflected to what's happening right here in front of me now? Or is this younger Kohn trying to make me aware that this feels like something we've been through before? Is this emotion that I'm feeling relevant to this situation? Here's what the pause also allows me to do. What is the decision that serves my long-term best interest? See, because even though, watch this, and I want y'all to pay close attention. This moment triggered something from my past. Yes? Okay. So in this moment, triggering something from my past, I assessed this moment for what it is. And guess what I discovered? My security detail gave me proper information because this person is truly being disrespectful. So the feeling of anger that I felt about what was just said to me that was triggered from my past experience was accurate. The feeling of I will not be spoken to, I will not be demeaned, I will not be belittled, all of that came from my past because I was demeaned and belittled. Whatever my past experiences were that is informing me that this is feeling the same way, they were accurate. This person is being disrespectful. But here's the thing about the pause between the feeling and the reacting. I'm allowed to decide to take actions that serve my long-term best interest and not just to take actions that the emotions are giving me. So again, yes, this thing that just happened to me, the anger that I felt coming up in me was valid because this person is accurately disrespecting me. But because I see my anger as information and not directions, I don't act out in an angry way. But I deal with this person in this situation in a manner that serves my long-term best interest. Guess why? Because my emotions were there to help me, not to cause me to crash out. Because my emotions are here to give me information. So step 1, When an emotional reaction rises, don't silence it, but pause and ask yourself, what part of me is speaking right now? What part of me is experiencing this emotion, and where is this emotion coming from? When you recognize that it's your inner child, here's a powerful question. What does my inner child need to hear in this moment? What does my inner child needs to hear in this moment? Because if it is a trigger, what would I have needed to hear back then when the thing actually happened? It's the same thing I need to hear right now. Does that make sense to you all? Purple hearts in the chat if it does. So step 1, create a pause between the feeling and the reacting. Step 2, once you've asked yourself, what does my inner child need to hear in this moment? Speak those words to yourself. Speak those words to yourself. So if it's fear that you're dealing with, I hear you. I know why we're scared in this moment, but we're not in danger. If you had a child with you, and let's say this child, this is a good analogy. If you had a child with you, and let's say that this child has been through some traumatic experiences, and this child struggles with a bit of anxiety. And sometimes you go places with this kid that you just, maybe you adopted this kid, or maybe you've been giving temporary care for this kid. And so when you go places like the grocery store and someone may be on their phone and someone may raise their voice on the phone and the child reacts in a defensive, in a scared way, because this child was in an environment where people were raising their voice at this child and being very verbally abusive to the child. So when the child reacts and jumps and acts scared, what would you say to that child? Isn't it so easy for us to see that we are more than equipped to nurture and pour into children that are in need without even having to fully understand what that child has fully been through? You recognize instantly, energetically, you know what you need to say to that child that's in need. If you stop fighting the voice in your head and you see that voice in your head as your inner child, maybe you can start pouring love into yourself the way that you will pour into this child that you've been given temporary custody of, because it is the same need. I want to show you all something. Your inner child is not trying to get permission from you. You don't need permission from your inner child. Your inner child needs leadership from the adult you. The type of leadership that you would say, I've watched this person handle their inner child, and I can trust them to speak to my inner child. Instead of us fighting that voice in our minds, we simply need to recognize where the feeling or the thought is directing you to look and not how it's directing you to act. Instead of keep fighting the thoughts and keep fighting the feelings that seem to be contrary to what you want to do in your life and where you want to go and all the things that you believe about yourself, instead of keep fighting them, just recognize them as trying to direct you to where you need to focus on. Where do you need to pour into in your life? Because that's where the fear is coming from. That's where the self-doubt is coming from. That's where the negativity is coming from. Step 1, create a pause between the feeling and reacting. Step 2, speak to your inner child once you recognize, what does my inner child need to hear in this moment? Step 3, make the decision that serves your long-term best interest. Make the decision that serves your long-term best interest and not that makes you feel good about what happened to you in the past. Because I'm going to tell you something. When you take the action, so watch this. When your emotions are giving you directions, you only feel good about the past that the emotion came out of because you probably just ruined something in the present. When your emotions are giving you directions and you're acting out of those emotions, doesn't it feel good? Listen, I am not going to sit here and tell you that the person that deals with anger, I am not aware that when you cuss somebody out, it feels good to you. I know. I'm not so detached from the reality that I'm not going to sit here and acknowledge that. I know it feels good to you when you cuss people out. I know. But it feels good to you temporarily. It feels good to you because you've made that little version of you that needed to feel protected, that felt violated, that younger version of you that felt like they stepped on the toes, they touched the scab that hasn't healed, they touched a wound that you haven't fully worked on. That version of you felt like, yes, you stood up for us, you cursed them out. But you were reacting to that, the past. That cursing them out is not serving your long-term best interest, and you know that. But it felt good because it felt good about you serving that past wound, that version of you that felt like it needed to be protected. You cursing them out served that. But the moment, that wasn't appropriate. Hey, straight from straight. One of the things that I love and what I notice here is I know when someone comes through our drive-through or our conversation here and you just need love and attention. So something that is different than what many people do on their platforms is we stop and we take a moment to say, we love you. And no matter what your current experience or your current reality is or what your environment is, I want you to know that you are loved and that the people here are people that share a common foundation that all of us are deserving of love. So I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to stop scrolling on your phone and typing in the chat, right? Because you taking those actions gave me an opportunity to be a distributor of love and pour some love on you. So thank you for coming through the conversation. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for being here. And I just want you to know for sure that you are loved. Despite what your current situation or circumstance may be, you truly are loved. And if you want to experience that love, you're right here around people that can give it to you. All right? With that being said, we're going to get back to why we're here, which is to love, learn, and get some wisdom. All right? So, let that final decision be one that serves your long-term best interest, right? So the child in you might want to avoid, lash out, or hide. None of those three decisions are going to serve your long-term best interest. It's up to you, the adult, that now has the consciousness of this information to say, I understand why I feel the way that I feel, but I'm choosing what's best for us. I understand that this emotion is trying to protect me, but after having listened to the emotion as information, after having assessed what's in front of me, I'm going to make the decision that serves my long-term best interest. All right? I'll give you all this wisdom nugget. In essence, your inner child is your passenger, and you as the adult, you're the driver. You're in charge. All right? Now, if you're hearing this information and you're thinking, okay, coach, what are the next steps? Let's start here. It doesn't just happen because you say to yourself, we're safe now, right? It doesn't just happen because you're speaking those words into your inner child when you recognize it. But it happens when you prove over and over again that you will listen to that fear without letting it dictate the actions that you take. That you'll listen to that anxiety without letting it overwhelm you into a state of being paralyzed. That you will listen to that hesitation without letting it stop you from taking the steps that are clearly in front of you. It starts to happen when you do this over and over and over again. And sometimes it may feel repetitive, but that's the process. Because if you've been living a certain way, the mechanical part of your operation is going to always default to what has felt safe in the past. And until you put enough information in that file to where that reaction is no longer necessary as far as making you feel safe, then it's going to keep happening. So you have to be aware and give yourself the grace that if that thought pops up again, it's okay. I understand why we feel afraid, Kohn, and we're going to be fine. It's okay. I understand why we feel anxious about this moment, but we've got this under control. And if I have to do that 50 times before I go into that interview, that's what I'm going to do, because I understand this file keeps opening as a sense of trying to protect me and not stop me from being successful. All right, Corinne Lynn says, any advice on how to find the root of the anger? So, Corinne, I'm going to give you the process that we use through the Trauma to Triumph Healing Challenge. The first way to find the root of the anger is if we just dropped the thought of the anger for right now, and then I ask you to start telling me some moments in your life that stood out to you, moments that stood out in your development, in your childhood, where you believe the root of this anger is from, you'll just tell me some stories. And don't worry about trying to add points to the stories, but we would just identify the stories that stand out to your life. Then we would start identifying what triggers that anger. What are moments in your life, or what are the patterns that triggers that anger for you? Once we start to connect that, then what we're going to do is we're going to start to create an inner safe space for you. But this is the process of the healing challenge. There's not a magic bullet. If you just do this, you'll get to the root of it, right? Because that's not that. People that give out information that way, they don't. It's this idea that what I'm going to say to you universally works for everybody. And that's not what this process is. What we teach you through the healing challenge is a method by which you can take any experience. So to that question, how do I find the root of anger in my life? If you took this healing challenge from step 1, which is setting your intentions, I want to identify the root of the anger in my life. That's your intention. Step 2, how do we identify the root of your stories? What are the common themes or the things that stand out to you about your developmental years that you think may have a root or be relative to this anger in your life? And then we walk you through this process of not just identifying the root, identifying the patterns and the triggers, but also what part of you that had that experience is still holding on to a belief that you need to be protected. Because the anger is a means of you trying to protect yourself from a wound that has not healed. So I often look at people that deal with anger as your anger is your big bully brother or your big bully sister. Because the anger is a persona or a personality that is often developed to protect the wound that has not healed. And just like I described earlier, it's like a scab. Think of if you got a fresh scab on your arm. Every time something brushes up against that scab, you're going to jump, potentially get angry, and get defensive to protect the scab. So when you understand that anger is actually a behavior that is covering a root wound, then you know that we have to deal with another thing under the anger. So the anger is not the problem, but it's a process by which we get to that root. I would suggest to you that our next challenge starts in April. If you go to our website, happyhealing.com, that's HEALIN, healing without a G, and go to Trauma to Triumph Healing Challenge, you can sign up for that challenge using the promo code FIRMDECISION2025 and get enrolled now, and we can walk you through this process. There's no guessing to it. There's no confusion to it. We give you step by step how to learn this method and this modality so that you will have it. This isn't just you do the 12 weeks, you work through whatever it is that you're working through, and then you feel better. We teach you a healing modality that you will carry with you throughout your entire life, that every time you have something that comes up in your life that is rooted in a past experience, you can use this modality using the workbook and the 12 steps that we're going to send you to work through whatever that is. All right? Where were we? So yes, that idea of you just telling yourself one time that we're safe now is not integrating your inner child. Nurse Cynthia says, I'm struggling through with the trauma present day is the same betrayal trauma from the past. Cynthia, I'm going to tell you, I know that what you said is true, but I think the way that you're saying it is not going to serve us. And let me show you what I mean by that. You're saying that I'm struggling through with the trauma present day is the same betrayal trauma from the past. I'm going to tell you that the wound that is producing the pain is the same wound from the past. Why do I say it like that? Because it's not. We're saying the same thing. You're referring to it as trauma. I'm referring to it as the wound. And the reason why I'm referring to it as the wound, because the trauma that we reference is oftentimes the narrative that comes from the actual wound. And if we don't get to the root of that wound, so we heal the wound, we're going to do what we've always done for most of us in our adult life, which is we chase trying to heal or relieve the pain in our adult life. We try to relieve the pain that we feel in our struggling relationships. We try to relieve the pain that we feel in loneliness. We try to relieve the pain that we feel in anxiety. We try to relieve the pain that we feel in all of these other ways that the wound is manifesting itself in our adult life. But the trick is, and the purpose of inner child healing is this foundational principle. Your adult you carries the wound, but your adult you carries the pain, but your inner child carries the wound. So inner child healing is the method by which you heal the source of your pain. If you heal the source of the pain, you alleviate the pain automatically. Does that make sense? And so for many of you, again, that are still in this state of where you think you're battling that voice in your mind, the voice in your mind is not trying to control your life. The voice in your mind is just simply trying to feel safe enough to let you control your life. The voice in your mind is not trying to control your life. The voice in your mind is a version of you that simply wants to feel safe enough to let you control your life. The real question is, are you ready to stop battling yourself and start leading yourself? Are you ready to stop battling that inner child or that voice in your head and start leading that voice in your mind? Are you ready to be whole? Because here's something that I'm going to say that many of us do not know is a reality. Many of us think your entire life you live with a negative voice in your mind because you've had one in your mind. There are people that don't live with that negative voice. In fact, the voice in their minds tells them that they can do every and anything they set their minds to. It's conditioning. It's programming. It's reframing. Your inner child cannot heal on their own. All right, Cynthia says, how do you heal an inner child betrayal wound? Because that's what's being touched on. So in order to heal the original wound, we have to go back to where the injury happened. Where was the initial betrayal? And I'll work. We're gonna pause and do some in the moment coaching because that's what the work is. So let's go through what the Trauma to Triumph Healing Challenge would do if Nurse Cynthia started the challenge in April. So Nurse Cynthia, let's say you went ahead and you got your workbook today and we sent it to you and we started this challenge with you in April. And this was your intention, right? The first chapter, the first session in the workbook is setting your intention. And your intention of joining this challenge is, I want to know how to heal my inner child wound of betrayal. That's what you came into this challenge wanting to heal, okay? We'll walk you through the entire 12 weeks. The first thing we're going to identify is the root of your story. What is the event that stands out to you where you feel like this betrayal first happened? JC Wolf, happy healing to you, my brother. Welcome to the conversation. So as we wait, that first step is connecting the dots. Within the workbook, in session 2 for connecting the dots, all we're doing is identifying significant life events and their emotional impact. We're not trying to work through anything. We're not trying to solve any problems. I just want you to get it out of your system. What are the significant life events and their emotional impacts that you feel are connected to what you have set out for your intentions in this challenge? Once we establish that, Nurse Cynthia, excuse me, the next thing that I'm going to ask you is, what are some of the patterns that trigger this sense of betrayal? Once we establish that, the next thing we're going to do is start teaching you how to create your inner safe space. Why do we jump straight to creating an inner safe space, Coach? Because once we start to identify what it is that you want to work on and the part of you or the version of you that had that experience, we must create a space where we can do the work, the reframing, the changing of perspective, and that happens within your inner safe space. Nurse Cynthia, I'm not seeing those responses for us to do this coaching session, for us to do the back and forth. I'm presuming you're maybe busy or maybe your responses are just getting uploaded a little bit slow. So what I'm going to do is jump back into this information that I want to deliver, and then once your answers pop up, I'll jump back in and we can do this on the spot coaching session together. Okay? But where I was telling you all that your inner child cannot heal on their own. Think about it. The version of you that is frozen in that experience, the version of you that never grew past that experience, that never saw past that experience, that is stuck right in that place, cannot heal on their own. That's your job. You have to be the savior that you've been looking for your entire life. I often tell people nobody is coming to save you. And once that shock of that reality hits you, I want you to then get the release that it's only because you are capable. You are it. And many of you may feel like that's too much of a burden, Coach. I can't. Well, here's the thing. We've put this entire thing together so that you don't have to figure this out by yourself, right? We give you a clear roadmap so that you don't have to, you can stop feeling like you're lost or confused. You can stop feeling like you don't understand how we're going to help you walk straight through it. Okay? Here's what we offer with putting this healing challenge together. We're going to give you 12 weeks of structured healing sessions. No more wondering what to work on every week. No more wondering what I need to be focusing on, if I need to move on to the next session. Everything is right there for you. It's a step-by-step, and it's going to build from the last session into the next session. Secondly, you're going to get our private Zoom calls. We have 2 right now that are scheduled into the program. That's where you're going to get direct coaching with myself so that you never have to figure out, okay, coach, I have a personal struggle with the exercise. How do I work through it, right? In our live Zoom coaching sessions, those of you that are enrolled in the session, you will get to ask your questions. You will get to present whatever challenges that you're facing, and you'll get direct feedback on whatever those are. Again, we're going to direct ship you our workbook. 2 to 3 business days, we're going to express ship it to you. You get direct email access throughout the entire 12 weeks of the challenge. So at any point, if we're not in session or we have a few days until our next masterclass and you have a question, you can send that email and you'll get a direct response. You also get to sit in on these 2 live public teachings where we continue to expand on the information that we're sharing. Vibing on the AP, happy healing to you. Jillian, happy healing to you. I'm trying to see if... All right, Nurse Cynthia may have gotten busy, so we didn't get the follow-up, but let's keep moving. So let me ask you all this. For many of you that are still in that space of, hey, I'm not sure exactly if I'm ready or if... Okay, here we go. All right, Nurse Cynthia, so what I was asking you, the question that I asked was, what is the event, okay, at age 10 and boyfriend at age 15? So first I want to say, we just want to take in a moment to acknowledge your experience. Those are tough experiences for anyone to have gone through. And oftentimes, SA is one of the tougher experiences for us to navigate with inner child healing because the process doesn't really change. And it's tough because you still have to operate from the perspective of, I am responsible for the outcome of my life despite what has happened to me. And I want to be very specific and clear about that. When we say that we are creating the reality that we're experiencing, we're not saying that everything that comes your way is a direct response to your creation. But what we're saying is everything that comes your way, the outcome is a direct response of your response. Or the outcome is a direct reflection of how you responded. All right? So let me establish that. Now, to go back to how do you heal the wound of betrayal, I would ask you this. What did that betrayal say to you about you? When you were 10 and 15 and these things happened to you, what did you surmise about yourself from those experiences? And Nurse Cynthia, hopefully we can get some quicker responses. And if you're busy, cool, not a problem. But if we're going to work through this, I do need to get some responses so that I'm not just kind of sitting. Because not only do we have the live event where you all are here and you're able to see the comments and you're able to engage with the comments, but we have some other platforms that we're on as well. Okay, so Nurse Cynthia said that I was not good enough. So I want you all to highlight and see something. The narrative was about betrayal. The wound is not the same as the narrative. So I could have sat here and had a whole conversation with Nurse Cynthia about betrayal, but having done this work for over 20 years in different spaces, what I understand is oftentimes what we are looking at is not the wound. Now, having had Nurse Cynthia give that response that the wound is that I was not good enough, I'm going to actually attach the whole sentence together. That if the betrayal was physical assault, sexual assault, And from that, I derived that I was not good enough. There was a connection there. I was not good enough for what? Nurse Cynthia, I need you to answer this. So the example, or it could be any of one of these, but I need your honest experience. I was not good enough to be protected from this person. I was not good enough to be believed after it happened. I was not good enough for it not to happen too. There was a conclusion. It wasn't just I was not good enough. Perhaps I don't know what belief I had at age 10, but more so at age 15 event. Okay. So what was the I was not good enough for what? And again, I appreciate everyone's patience while we work through this with Nurse Cynthia. One of the things that I always say, these are the types of interactions that we have in our masterclass. And what makes the masterclass so powerful is you get to see these limiting beliefs and some of these ideas fall off of people. And if you are listening, you can see how this can be relative to your life as well. And Nurse Cynthia's response is being pretty enough girlfriend for the boyfriend. That is the same. I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not enough. Right? So Nurse Cynthia, what we would do in this case is the betrayal is not really even the issue. And now this is where it gets a little bit tough in our conversation. What you may be experiencing today isn't even just the issue of the betrayal. The I am not good enough will often put you in a situation where you find yourself going after or accepting people in your life that don't value you enough to give you the treatment that you deserve. The reason why you either A, attract or accept their attraction is for this root that we're highlighting, that I am not good enough. So, the dealing with the root wound of I am not good enough will often put you in a position to where what you think is the betrayal that you're dealing with today is likely you accepting or attracting people into your life that are betraying you. Because if you address that wound and you felt like you were good enough, your standards would increase, your discernment would increase, and you wouldn't allow necessarily people in your life that would cause this betrayal. Not saying that just because you've healed, no one will ever betray you again. But what I am highlighting is oftentimes the wound of I am not good enough, I am not worthy, will lead us to allow things in our life or allow people in our life that serve our wound. Meaning, if I don't feel like I'm good enough, I'm never going to necessarily attract to myself, or I don't have the type of discernment that's able to recognize when people that I'm allowing in my life are going to see me as not good enough because I don't see myself as good enough. And to Nurse Cynthia's response, for everybody else that's hearing us on the other platforms, exactly. And that's why I'm wanting to just rid myself of current husband, because I do feel worthy now. And that is a conversation that we can pick up on another time, Cynthia. But I appreciate, because that reality is one that many people face on their healing journey, where you may be in a committed relationship, in a marriage, or whatever the case may be, and that person married the version of you that may have been operating out of your trauma. That person married the version of you that may have been still operating out of your wound of I am not good enough. And now that you are growing, you find yourself with someone that still wants to deal with the older version of you. We could pick that up in another conversation, Cynthia, because there is a lot more nuances there to work on. And how do you work through that? One of the simpler things is, if you are still committed to that person in that situation, then the greatest thing that you can do is be an example of what this healing is doing for you. And that is a burden that I don't tell people to take on lightly, because it's not an easy task. But again, different conversation on how do you navigate that in your relationships and in your relationships when that change is happening. All right. But I hope that we were all able to see, just in that small moment of unpacking, we went from dealing with just the issue of betrayal to realizing that the underlying wound was I am not good enough. And out of that underlying wound, I am probably allowing people in my life or attracting people in my life that will continue to betray me because they don't see me as good enough to treat any other way because I don't see myself that way. The version of you that's healed, whole, and at peace is waiting on the other side of this healing challenge. You're welcome, Nurse Cynthia. Do you believe that that is you? When you look in your mirror in the morning, do you see someone that is whole, healed, and at peace? And if you don't, what are you waiting for? Do you think that just happens because people have a desire to be whole or to heal? Do you think it just happens because you have awareness? Oh, I'm listening to all this great information. One of the reasons why we specifically made this a healing challenge because we want people to know that it is challenging. So will you keep battling yourself or will you start leading yourself? Will you keep battling yourself or will you finally step up and lead your healing? Our next challenge starts in April. In 2 weeks, we're going to start the boot camp for that challenge, which is the 2 weeks that we take to set our intentions going into the challenge. We've created different opportunities to allow you to participate regardless where you may be on your journey. This is not we've simplified this to a point where it's accessible no matter what your interaction with healing, inner work, inner child healing has been. You can come along and grab this workbook and follow along the 12 weeks step by step, along with the private Zoom sessions that we have in our masterclass where you can ask your questions. So along with the private Zoom sessions, along with the workbook, along with all the other resources that we're going to give you, the most important thing is you get a community of people that are going to take this journey with you. So my question is, what are we waiting for? We may tell ourselves, I don't have the time, coach. Right? I don't have the time, coach. You may tell yourself you don't have the time. And I simply say to you, we make time for the people who add value to our lives. And I think you add value to your life. It's not a matter of time. We say that because we've been conditioned to fight with time. It's not a matter of time, it's a matter of priority. And let me tell you why. Because healing is not something that you just add to your list of things to do as if it is just another thing. Healing is the foundation by which the quality of everything else in your life improves. So don't tell yourself that you don't have time. That's just your trauma convincing you to stay stuck. One of my favorites, coach, I can't afford it. Here's what I'm going to simply say to you. Treat yourself to healing. Treat yourself to healing. Why do I say for you to treat yourself? Because we are excellent at justifying expenses when we think we deserve it. When we think we deserve it, we will justify any expense. Do you deserve to be whole and healed? Then treat yourself to it. We've priced this at an expensive dinner, but we're offering you 12 weeks. You're not going to get this value of 12 weeks of commitment, 12 weeks of coaching, 12 weeks of teaching, 12 weeks of work. My question is, don't cheat yourself. Or my statement is, don't cheat yourself. Treat yourself. All right. For those of you that are joining us on YouTube, thank you for being a part of this conversation. We greatly appreciate you. Please do like and subscribe to the page, as well as turn on your notification bell so that you're notified whenever we release new content. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here with me. As always, I love you all and happy healing.